Okay, good morning. Today we begin sixth parak of Nedarim, page 49a. As I mentioned yesterday, we're going back to the exact meaning of certain words and how to interpret the words a person uses when he makes a neder. Another minham avushal. Person makes a neder against eating something that is cooked, using that specific word mavushal. Mutar b'tzliu shaluk. So cooking implies cooking in water, hot water. So you can eat roasted and parboiled foods because that doesn't come under the umbrella of cooked food in the sense of cooked in water. Amar kodam tavshil shani time. A person makes a neder against eating a tavshil, a cooked food, and this is a broader food. Also, ramase kedera rach. You can't eat like cooked food that is soft or liquidy. Mutar ba'ava, but you can eat solid cooked food. So again, it's just a matter of how we interpret the word tavshil. A tavshil is apparently something, like porridge or something that you would kind of, dip something into, as we often see in the Gemara. Mutar bebeitza turmuta, and you can eat a turmuta egg, whatever that is, ubidlas haramutza, and a ramutza gourd. And the Gemara will discuss that a little bit. But those are not considered tavshil. Another mimase kedera, a person makes a neder against eating something cooked in a pot, prepared in a pot, and also only mimase ritachta. You can, what does that include? That includes food that is boiled for a long time. And Omar Konam Hayori Kedera time, but if a person says makes a neder against something that goes into a pot, so also then you're forbidden from eating any food that is cooked in the pot. Okay, so then it's not specific to how it's cooked in the pot and so on, but it's particular to just to something that's cooked in the pot. All right. Tanya, where it says Tanya, Rabbi Yoshi Oser. Rabbi Yoshi goes against the Mishnah. That if you say the first phrase in the Mishnah was Hanoder, he includes things that are roasted. And I have a support, not a clear proof, but a support from a pasuk. Shenamar vayavashlus apesach ba'esh kamishpat. So this is a verse from from Divrei Yamim, where it refers to the carbon pesach as something that they cook using the word vayavashlu. Now, we know that the carbon pesach can only be made roasted, right? That's very clear in the Torah when it says how to prepare the carbon pesach to eat. So by using the word vayavashlu, that makes it clear to Rav Yoshia that the word something min hamavushal, that something that is cooked can include something that's roasted. So Gemara says so maybe we can attribute the argument of Yoshia in our Mishnah to the following: Rav Yoshia savar halacha lashon Torah. Rav Yoshia says, how you determine the meaning of a person's words? See how the Torah uses that word. However the Torah uses that word, that's how we should interpret it. So since the Torah, the broader Tanakh, uses the word vayavashlu to mean to include roasted, because it refers to the Pesach, therefore we would say that that's what is how we interpret the person's words when he says, I'm not going to eat min hamavushal. But the Tana Dilan Savar, the Tana of our Mishnah holds, no, that's not how we commonly today use the word mavushal. Mavushal means boiled. And so when a person makes a neder not to eat something mavushal, that's what he means, because he's speaking English, right? He's speaking the contemporary language, and we don't interpret it how the Torah wrote it, X hundreds or thousands of years ago. Gemara says, look, not necessarily. No, we know, and we've seen this all over in the Nedarim, that you go by common usage of a word. That's what people mean when they use a word. Marki Asri. But what's the difference between Rav Yoshia and the Tana of our Mishnah. They're arguing over, basically they're reflecting the use of language wherever they happen to live. Where Rabbi Yoshia lived, they would use the word mavushal also for roasted, and where the Tana of our Mishnah lived, they would not do so. They would only refer to boiled foods. Yasmin Tana Dilan Tzali Karle Tzali, and where our Tana of our Mishnah lived, that something roasted, they call it roasted. Mavushal Karle. And they would call something cooked boiled, they would call it mavushal. They asked Rabbi Yoshia, but Rabbi Yoshia, I feel tzali kar mavushal. They would use mavushal as a broader term, and that's why he interprets mavushal as a broader term. So
this could have halakhic consequences in terms of the definition of mavushal wine and grape juice.
You mean, well, I don't know if anybody ever roasts wine. Yeah, how do you mean?
Well, there's different ways in which you can heat up wine. So, for instance, pasteurization automatically qualify.
I see. Well, however, I think it's clear what the rabbis were referring to when they exempted mavushal wine was something that is cooked. Yeah, so you could say, like, I mean, in the sense of what did they mean when they said cooked? Yeah, you're right. But remember that we're not talking about Nedarim there, right? In Nedarim, it's specifically, we go achar lashon b'nei adam, so that's something that changes over time, right? So what we refer to as cooked in another place today, or in 100 years ago, or from now here, might take on a different meaning. That happens all the time with words, right? And what you're talking about, it definitely would mean, what did the rabbis mean when they said, I mean, I think would mean, what did they mean when they said mavushal is exempted, right?
Yeah, possibly, but it's pasteurization didn't exist until the 19th century. So how would they have treated?
Yeah, that's okay. Great question. Yeah, but I don't think you could apply, like here we're talking about ben Nedarim halech achar lashon b'nei adam. Specifically, we're referring to Nedarim. How do you interpret what a person says? So it's a little bit of a different situation. Although your question is still a valid one. How do you apply what the rabbi said, X years ago to modern processes that they did not experience? So that's part of the whole halakha literature, is how to modernize or how to interpret statements or rulings from previous generations to modern situations. Yeah.
Yes.
So Gemara says Vakra Nasi Blo. So you're saying that Rabbi Yoshia is just talking about how they spoke. He rules that way because of how they spoke in his location, but he defends himself with a pasuk, right, with a verse from Tanakh. So, like, he seems to be saying that it's a universal rule, right? So the answer is asmach to biyamad. Well, that's exactly what he said. He says, I don't have a proof for this, but I have a support, right? Like, here's a place in the Torah where they use the language the way they use it in my town, but he's not claiming that everyone uses this language. Okay. Konam tavshil. Next part of the Mishnah says, if I make a neder against a tavshil, and the Mishnah interpreted that as liquidy food. Vaha mitavshil nadar. Like, more questions, like a tavshil, why does that only include runny foods that are cooked? What about solid foods that are cooked in water? That should be a tavshil. Amar Atana kol midi demis achel le rifta tavshil karale. That Tana, again, it's a question of how that, what was the common use of language in the experience of that Tana. In his experience, anything that is kind of dipped, or that you kind of dip bread into to eat it, meaning something that's runny, right? Saucy, whatever, that's called a tavshil. And something that you cut with a knife and fork and eat by itself, that's not called a tavshil. Vatanya, so the Gemara says, well, wait a minute, we have another brayso. Another minute tavshil, asur b'chol minei tavshil, v'asur b'tzli v'shaluk v'mivushal. Another source says that a tavshil includes things that are roasted, things that are parboiled, and not just runny food. V'asur b'hitrios rakos. What it doesn't include in this brisa is tender squash. Because people who are sick eat their bread with that squash. So the so it seems like a tavshil is something not that is dipped in bread, but that's eaten with bread. Actually, this is a support. This is not a question. This is, as we've seen in Nedarim, sometimes the language is used a little differently. So this is supporting the idea that something that you dip your bread into is a tavshil. So the Gemara says, on a side note, that says that like the soft squash, right? So that's something that sick people eat. So therefore, it's something that, even though customarily it's only sick people would dip their bread into it, it's still considered a tavshil. Rabbi Yirmiyah got sick. He went to a doctor's office. Or the doctor came to him, actually, a house call. And he saw that he's eating squash, right? He's got squash on the counter ready for his dinner. The doctor walked out. Amar, he said, Malach Mosa Islay B'dain Beisei Vana Yose. It's like, this guy is going to die. If he's going to eat that squash, nothing I can do to help him. So in other words, this implies that squash for a sick person is not a good remedy. On the contrary, it's dangerous for a sick person. Says, yeah, we were talking about tender squash. The story with the doctor walking out is about hard squash. So the hard squash was going to kill the sick person, and the doctor didn't want to be involved. But soft squash, sick people do and should eat with bread, and therefore it's called a tavshil. Rava Bar Ula Amar. Rava Bar Ula answers the doctor question as follows: Ha b'kara gufe v'ha b'gave dekara. We're talking about eating the whole squash is bad, but with the peel and everything. I guess with most squashes you can't really do that, I guess, but there are some, like the delicata squash, you eat whole. But so that's bad. That could be bad for you. But the inside, where you scoop out the inside of the squash, that's good for the sick person to dip his bread into. The Yamar Yehuda says, "Luliva dekara basilka." The insides of a squash cooked with leeks are good. That's good to eat. Iva de kitana bekutcha, and also the insides of a flax plant that are eaten with kutach, which is that kind of the kutach. I think is that the rotten fish sauce, or is it the porridge? I can't remember, but it's a common.
Stein Salt says it's a dip made from whey salt and fermented bread that's become moldy.
Oh yeah, right. Okay, that's a very appetizing sounding concoction. But you shouldn't tell people this about the flax, that it's good for healing to eat flax this way before ignorant people, which is a bit of a strange statement. Like, why wouldn't you reveal this? So let's look at Rashi. Last Rashi on the page. Never because it's a good, food. Also, and you shouldn't tell these Amar is something that they should benefit from. It's a very strange idea, right? Like, why are you going to withhold, life-saving information or even, healthful information from someone just because they're ignorant? And some say it's so that, if they think it's so good, then they're gonna use up they'll use up all the flax crop for that, and they'll go overboard on it, and there won't be any flax to make linen. So, like, don't tell ignorant people these general rules because they'll go overboard on it. Okay, it's not I don't find that such a satisfactory explanation either. But I'll just leave that out there for you to consider.
I use flaxseed meal in baking.
But and yet there still seems to be enough. First of all, you're not ignorant, but don't tell us, because we might go use up all the flax. But it seems like there's plenty of time for making linen, even though you use it in baking. Okay. Rava says man cholim. We're not talking about actual sick people, but sick people, meaning this flax is good for sick people. He doesn't mean sick people. It means Rabbanan, means the rabbis, Torah scholars. We've seen this a few places in the Gemara where the Gemara implies or assumes that people who spend all their time studying are not physically such great specimens. So it's not, so the Gemara was not saying that it's good for sick people to eat squash. It's good for Torah scholars to eat squash. And don't tell the Amarants, don't tell the Boers, because maybe they'll think that, that there's something the rabbis are hiding from them, and you really should eat a lot of squash, and they'll eat all the squash, and there won't be any left for the rabbis. But really, it's not for them. It's only for it's only for the sickly rabbis and not for the healthy general population. That it's good. Okay. Rava and Rava says this idea in another place. Rava said, "Kaman matzlinan al katsire al marie." According to who is the idea that we should pray for sick people and ill people? Kaman Rabbi Yossi. It's according to Rabbi Yossi. Mida amar katsire marie. Because there are two different terms here, like we'll translate them ill and sick. Shmamine, kitsire, mamash. One of them refers to really sick people. Maria Rabbanan, the other refers to the rabbis who are not really sick, but their constitutions are not as strong because of their occupation with Torah. Okay. Mutar ba'ava. Back to the Mishnah. A person who either against cooked food is allowed to eat a solid cooked food, not a soft cooked food. Masnisim dolok kebavlai. That's not that doesn't agree with the practice of the Babylonians. Jamar b'zera bavlai tipshai. These foolish Babylonians, the achle rachma balachma. They eat bread together with bread. So in other words, there's like you have a grain product that's like, let's say, like an oatmeal, and people will the Babylonians would scoop it up with their bread. So it's like, that's silly, you're putting bread on your bread, right? Or grain on your grain. So that indicates that people do eat their thick porridge with bread. Rav Chisda says, is there someone here who could ask those people who eat in Hutzal, this city, Hadain daisa heichin ma'ali l'mechla. This porridge that you eat with bread, how do you eat it? Dechite b'lachman dechite. You eat wheat porridge with wheat bread. Udasari b'lachman dasari, and barley porridge with barley bread. Odilma dechite b'sari b'dechite. Maybe mix it up. Rava achle b'chasise. Rava would eat his bread with a porridge made from chasise, which apparently is like grain dried in the oven. Okay. Good to know. Rabba bar Rav Huna, Ashkechel Rav Huna, the Ka'achil Daisa Betzvasa. Rabba bar Rav Huna found Rav Huna, his father, eating porridge with his fingers. Amalei said, Amai Ka'achil Marbiya. Why are you eating with your hands? Why don't you use a spoon? Amalei, Achiyam Rav is what Rav says, Daisa Betzvata Basim. It's good to eat porridge with your fingers. And even better if you eat with 2 fingers. Even better with 3 fingers. Okay, so this was Rav's practice. It's like it tastes better if you eat with your fingers, or maybe it's better for you. But yeah, apparently it's like it's more enjoyable if you eat it with your fingers. Amalei Rav l'chia b'rei. Rav said to his son, Amalei Rav Huna. Well, mezamnin lach l'mechal daisa. If you get an invitation to go eat porridge, ad parsa, and then it's worth the trip up to 1 parsa. Parsa is what? It's like an hour trip, if I remember correctly. L'mechal bisra de Torah. If you're invited for some steak, ad chlasa parsa, and that's worth a 3-hour trip, a 3 parsa trip. I would agree with that. Amalei Rav l'chia b'rei. Rav said to his son, Chia, v'chein amalei Rav Huna Rav b'rei. Rav Huna also told his son, after you eat something, don't spit in front of your teacher. Except for 2 things. If you're eating squash or porridge, then if you want to spit, you should spit. Because the thing that you're spitting out is very indigestible, like lead. of Filu Kamishvar Malkaflot. And then even if you're in front of the king, don't hold back, because you'll be injuring yourself by swallowing this, the inedible part of the squash or the porridge. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda were eating porridge. One was using his fingers, and the other was using a piece of wood, a piece of bark as a implement. So the one using bark said to the other, like, how, like, why do I have to eat your waste, right? Meaning that you're dipping your fingers in it. Your hands are dirty. I have to eat from like the dirt from your hands. And the response was, like, if you're double dipping, then your saliva gets into the food. And so, like, don't give me a hard time about my hands, because you're not so pure either. Even though you're eating with an implement, I'm still getting your saliva because you're putting your implement back in the communal bowl. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, Aisul Kamayu, the Lufsin. They brought some. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon were served these Lufsin, those kind of figs. Rabbi Yehuda achal, Rabbi Shimon lachal. Rabbi Yehuda ate it, Rabbi Shimon did not. Rabbi Yehuda, my tamal lachamar, why aren't you eating? Rabbi Shimon answered them, Elu ein yotzin mibnei me'ayim kalikar. These kind of figs, it's like they're never going to come out of my body. They're indigestible. If that's the case, like, then we should eat them, because then the food will still be in our body tomorrow. If they don't get digested, then we'll still be working on them tomorrow, and we won't need to have breakfast tomorrow. Okay, that seems a little odd. But I guess they weren't expecting to have much food tomorrow, so something that takes a long time to digest maybe is a better bet. Rabbi Yasu Kamid Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Yehuda was before Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Tarfon, he said to him, Hayom Panecha Suhubin, your face is like shining today. So he answered, Emma Shiatu. Yesterday your workers went out to the field, and they brought us beets. Below Malach, and we ate the beets without salt. So that apparently makes my complexion good. It makes my face shine. But if we had eaten them with salt, and then they would have even glowed even more. Amara Hit Matron to Rabbi Yehuda, a certain Roman matron said to Rabbi Yehuda, Mora Baravi, like, how could you be a teacher and Rabbi and be drunk? Apparently she found him in a state of this face shining, and she thought that his face was glowing. Like, drunks sometimes get like big red noses or whatever. Their complexion can be very ruddy. So she's like, you're a teacher, you're a rabbi. How can you be drunk? So he said to her, Hemnusa biada dahitza, by your honor, itaimna elakidusha v'avdalta v'arba pisa. The only alcohol I drink is Kiddush and Havdalah and the 4 cups of wine on Pesach. So I'm no drunk. V'chograni tzedayim in Pesach ad hatzeres. And not only that, but on Pesach I drink the 4 cups, and then I have a headache until Shavuos. So don't call me a drunk. I can barely tolerate any wine at all, and I never drink wine. Ella, so why is my face shiny? It's my wisdom that makes my face glow. So he didn't even attribute it to the beets. He was, I guess, addressing the what she was saying about him being a rabbi. So why my face is shining? Not because I'm drinking, just because I'm a rabbi, because I'm a wise person, and that makes the Torah makes my face shine. A certain Tzeduki said to Rabbi Yehuda, your shining face, you look like either you take interest or you're a pig farmer. I guess if you take interest, you make a lot of money, and so I guess you eat well or whatever. You look healthy, your face is glowing, or you're a pig farmer, which I guess was also a profitable occupation, or maybe he spent a lot of time outdoors or something. Amalei. And so Rabbi Yehuda said to him, "Biyudai tarvayo asiran." Don't be ridiculous. Among Jews, you can't lend with interest and you can't raise pigs. Ela asrim v'arba beis hakise isli min beisa v'yadei midrasha. The reason that I look so healthy is there's 24 washrooms between my house and the base Medrash. And I relieve myself frequently. I don't have to hold it in, so that is why I look so. Rabbi Yehuda, when Rabbi Yehuda came into the base Medrash, Shakil Gulfa al Kasve, he carried a jug on his shoulders that he could sit on when he was studying. Amar, he said, Gadol malacha shemchabedes balao. The labor of carrying my stool around is it gives me honor. Like it gives me honor that I can carry my own stool to the base Medrash. Rabbi Shimon Shakil Tzan al Kasvei. Shimon carried a basket on his shoulders to sit on when he got to the base Medrash. Amar, he said, Gadol malacha shemchabedes balao. Same thing. Devesed Rabbi Yehuda Naktas Amar. Rabbi Yehuda's wife went to buy wool. Avda glima dehutve. She made a nice coat out of the wool. Kanafkas l'shuka mikasime. And when she would go out, she'd wear the coat. Kanafik Rabbi Yehuda l'tzliya. When Rabbi Yehuda would go to pray, to daven, hava mikase umatzla. He would wear the same coat and he would pray with it. V'kan michse be hava mavarech baruch she'atani me'il. And when he put it on to go out to shul, he would make a bracha, blessing God that made me this coat. So one time Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel made a fast, presumably for drought or whatever. Rabbi Yehuda also levei tanisa, and Rabbi Yehuda didn't come to this, I guess, referring to the prayer service that accompanied the fast. Amrilai. So they said to him, Lo islay kisuya. Why Rabbi didn't come? Must be he didn't have anything. It's cold outside, and he didn't have anything to wear. Shadar le glima v'lo kabil. So Rabbi Shimon says, "Oh, send him over a coat." Sent him over a coat, and Rabbi Yehuda did not accept it. Dali tzipsa, Rashi says he lifted up the mat that he was sitting on to show him that I got no coat here. And guess what happened? And apparently it's not clear from the Gemara story what happened here, but the understanding is that he lifted up the corner of the mat, and what do you know? There was like a lot of money buried there. So he said to the messenger, look what we have here. If I wanted a coat, I would buy a coat. So like don't have Rabbi Shimon send me a coat. But I don't want to take advantage of this miraculous money appearing here. I'm not going to buy myself stuff with money that I didn't earn. I'm not going to take pleasure from this miraculous things that happen to me in this world. So, and similarly, I guess I don't want Rabbi Gamliel's coat either. Although what's unclear is from the story, he had a coat. Like maybe he didn't have this coat anymore. Since we're talking about Rabbi Yehuda and coats, we're telling this story. But this story is rather mysterious. Like, why didn't he want to go to the shul? What's the story with the coat? Did he have a coat? Did he not have a coat? Why didn't he accept Rabbi Gamliel's coat? There's something going on here that appears to be kind of lost in the telling of the story. The details are missing. And I guess we'll leave it here and pick up tomorrow.
Yasha Khan, thank you.
Thank you.